You had mentioned that the deficit can grow with additional spending towards the end of the budget cycle. Is that correct?
The structural deficit calculation is recurring revenue versus recurring expense. So
Okay.
if you add recurring expense, it could change that.
So coupled with that, an increase in spending, or if any of the revenue sources come in below projections, that would also result in a wider structural deficit. Is that correct?
Agreed. It's revenue, recurring revenue against recurring expense. So any change in the revenue side or the expense side could adjust that calculation.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I just wanted to make that clear that those are the two things we're facing, that we're not out of the woods if we just stop the spending, but the projections have to come in where we are targeting them. Thank you. This budget relies approximately on $850 million in additional income and sales tax revenue from both bracket creep and price inflation, respectively, plus $750 million in new business taxes, totaling roughly $1.6 billion, which is a higher tax burden on both residents and employers. Did the administration consider tax cuts, and if so, why were none included?
So ultimately, as you mentioned earlier with the structural deficit calculation, the first priority was getting this structural deficit under control. So ultimately that required a significant amount of cuts first. So we're looking at almost $2 billion in cuts. And then with that, looking at $750 million in revenue raisers to bring down the structural deficit from we started at $3 billion down to about 1.6. Without making that, if we took away additional revenue, we'd be looking at increasing that structural deficit more. What we're also doing is looking at ways to collect additional revenue with the current streams. So our Division of Taxation is starting a couple projects, which you can go into detail if you'd like, but basically on ways to better enforce the tax liabilities that exist right now and looking for ways to actually just bring in more revenue based on the current streams.
Okay, has there been any exploration of tax cuts, just even as an actuarial exercise, just to see what that would do for revenue? And the reason I'm sort of belaboring the tax cut part, there is historic precedence for tax cuts actually increasing revenues. The Mellon tax cuts, which brought top rates down from 70% to 20%, actually resulted in 61% increase in revenues. So, and that's been done, that's just one example. This has been repeated over and over again. So this may be something where it could help both sides, the revenue side and the tax burden on businesses and residents. So has it? I mean,
I guess what I would say is this combination of the $2 billion in tax, budget cuts and our revenue raisers is our proposal for how we think the structural deficit should be balanced, how we should reduce the structural deficit at this point. We are open. We know you're going to have your deliberations. This legislature is going to look hard at this, and we're open for the discussions on other ways to get the structural deficit down. So, if you do have other ideas for how to reduce the structural deficit, sincerely open to those discussions.
Because the concern is, and you know it too, you see the studies year after year where New Jersey is at or near the bottom of business friendliness and tax burden, where you want to be number one a lot of times, but not in tax burden. And we see this over and over again. So something has to be done and to relieve the tax burden without impacting revenues. And if tax cuts, I think, are explored and implemented the right way, that may be the answer. So I think the administration should look at tax cuts in addition to additional revenue raisers, which we all know means taxes or fees. Okay, so this budget estimates 3% CPI inflation, but only 2% income tax revenue growth, meaning the administration projects that prices will outpace wages. The budget's own numbers do not show New Jersey becoming more affordable, and we hear this, I can't walk into a store without hearing somebody say, I can't afford to live here anymore. So affordability is a huge issue to address. Substantively, we just can't talk about it during a campaign and then go off, right into the sunset without really doing anything. So they show, the budget shows that purchasing power declining further, housing, groceries, energy, insurance, and everyday essentials have already absorbed and exceeded wage gains. Why does this budget contain no mechanism to reverse that trend?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part? Which trend are you referring to?
Sure. Purchasing power declining further because housing, groceries, energy, insurance, everyday essentials have absorbed and exceeded wage gains.
So a couple things on this. So I think in terms of Governor Sherrill's affordability agenda, the things that are happening in this budget, I think record property tax relief is part of this. $4.2 billion in total direct property tax relief. Record school funding, which ultimately has an impact on property taxes. Utility relief, freezing utility bills, and which we're bringing down the business the fees for new business registration. So there is a package of things that are happening around affordability.
That you can point to in the budget here that's already been implemented?
So record property tax relief, $4.2 billion. Record school funding, which obviously has an impact on local property tax bills. Bringing down business registration fees in the budget, bringing them down for a new business rent and entrance into the new businesses. So yeah, so there is.
You know what, I don't doubt, and school funding is another one of those third rails that are really, it depends, I guess, on where you are in the state, whether they've seen an increase in school funding or there's a cap on how much some towns can get, some districts can get as far as state aid. Which would really hurt quite a few of the districts in my district in particular, So the increase in school funding has not been felt by all of the districts around the state. And it's not limited to any one particular district. We had at least 10 of them come in here during the public hearing. And it's one tragic story after another with that, which is resulting in an increase at the local level. So whatever additional funding is coming out of the state has not trickled down to many of the school districts. So that, I don't know if that's really a legitimate answer to the affordability problem across the state. When some districts seem to fare very well, and other districts seem to have really, gotten shortchanged, so to speak. So I just want to point that out, that the additional school funding has not had the impact on the ground statewide.
So Governor Sherrill agrees. I mean, I think that she has looked at this as a 2-year budget process where we need to take a hard look at the school funding formula. I think with putting a budget together in 5 weeks didn't provide a sufficient opportunity to really put a wholesale change of the school funding formula, but she's directed the Department of Education to take a hard look at school funding and make sure that it's sufficiently funding our schools. That being said, it is still record school funding in this budget, the highest direct school funding in state history.
I'm not going to say that to anybody in my district because, they're going to look at me like I have two heads because they're not seeing it. So, I agree, and it's got to be apportioned better, and it's got to be a better, fairer, stronger and fairer distribution, remember that one, across the state. So that is something that the governor, I hope, will come up with some sort of formula that would be more equitable. And finally, a lot of times we address affordability by programs, and we have spending programs, benefit expansions, tax credits. They've been in place for years. If these policies really worked all along, we wouldn't be talking about affordability to the degree we have now. And why doesn't the budget propose, I think, fundamental changes? We tend to throw money at a problem and really not address the root causes of what the issue is. And, many of the programs that we have are designed to impact a certain issue. Why hasn't the budget here addressed the main root causes of that? And you can start with the school funding and issues like that. Property taxes, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, the affordability and the ways we're funding affordability in this budget, as I just listed, whether it's property tax relief, utility relief, business relief for new business registrations, that's part of the formula. The reality is, though, like affordability, we can't look at affordability in a vacuum. We have significant tariffs that are imposed on New Jersey businesses. We have energy prices as a result of the war in Iran that are skyrocketing. Affordability is caused by lots of different things. This budget addresses many things, and we'll continue to. And and again, we're open to ideas for where else we should be addressing affordability.
And that I agree with too, that a lot of the affordability issues, certainly utility costs, we hear about it all the time from businesses where they could just move right across the river to Pennsylvania and cut their utility bills by huge percentage points. And we've diminished supplies. We've closed down several generating plants. So certainly that's had an impact on affordability. That's outside the control just of a line item on the budget. So you're right, there are other contributing factors, let's say. But that's all I have. Thank you.